That was called a delay, so I could get the microphone. As Bob mentioned, next week or this coming Saturday is the Wild Game Dinner. And it's exciting. I'm excited to see what the Lord's going to do with that. We would like, if you have a favorite mount, deer mount, turkey mount, or whatever, if you want to show it off, please feel free to bring it. And I asked Christian before the service started, is it all right if I mention it to bring it to you because you'll be in charge of the day decor? But I thought I'd ask you that before I mentioned it. So if you have something like that, or I know last year he brought his hunting blind, he set it up just to give a little atmosphere. So see Christian on that. And also, we need some people to help set up. About 9 o'clock, come and set up tables. Get that all set up so we won't be rushed. Also, we have a sign-up sheet. You don't have to sign up if you're coming and bringing something, but it just kind of give us an idea of what you might be bringing. And please invite friends. And it was kind of interesting because in my introduction, I was going to mention R.C. Sproul's because for you, those of you who don't know me, I have never been to seminary. I have never really taken any Bible classes. And I appreciate the studies by R.C. Sproul's and the one we did with Francis Schaeffer, although sometimes it was just like, whew, that one passed over, you know. So some of the stuff they're talking about. But I found out this morning in Sunday school that wild game dinners are biblical. Because he was talking about in Genesis when Isaac was an old man and he told Esau before he gave him the blessing, go out and kill something, wild game, and bring it here to me and feed me. Wild game dinner. It's biblical. So, but I have not been to seminary, like I said, and I was actually thinking about this because at one point in time I used to fill in when pastors would go on vacation and preach, and I did that at a small church, and they asked, and they were considering me as a youth pastor. Believe it or not, I know that's scary, but the pastor of the church was a young guy, and I think he was right out of seminary because he asked me this question, and I never really thought about it. He says, what method of preaching do you use? What do you like to use? And I'm thinking, and I knew he was shortly out of seminary because he said, I prefer exegesis. And I'm thinking, I prefer to include Jesus in my preaching. But I didn't say that. You know, I was like, what? You know, and Mark does expository preaching where he preaches, you know, and he's working through the book of Acts. He worked through the book of Luke, you know, sometimes a verse at a time. You know, and then and I looked this up, and there's topical, you know, see something going on, you know, and you find verses to go with this. I prefer the Omalith method. And for you, those of you is like, well, I went to Bible classes and I've never heard of it. It basically stands for open mouth and let it fly. So I'm going to do that. You know, I'm not one of those people, and I'm sure there are people that everything they do, they say, what are you going to teach me in this, Lord? And there are some circumstances where I do that. But not always. You know, it's usually afterwards, and when I'm here, it's usually a message that the Lord is trying to teach me something. And a couple years ago, I'll give you an example. You know, if nobody's figured this out, I like to hunt, and I like to duck hunt and goose hunt, and I have a dog that he goes out and retrieves ducks and geese, and they actually have competitions. Hunt tests and stuff like this where you take your dog, you put him in hunting situations, and they assign so many points and you have a started dog and all the way up to grand champion. And then they just accumulate points by how well they do in these different hunt tests. And Gateway Retrievers organization in St. Louis has, throughout the summer, training days for this. So I took my dog to one of these training days. And I did not go thinking, Lord, what are you going to teach me? I'm going to take my dog to this over the bush area. What are you going to teach me? But it just so happened that he did actually teach me something. And if you pull up I'll pull up my PowerPoint here. I'll give you a little overview of the scenario. We're around a lake, okay? And where these numbers are, they had these bird launchers because they used real ducks. They weren't live ducks. But basically what the bird launcher was this gigantic slingshot. Yeah, and they put this duck in a pocket and pull it back and shoot that out to where those X's were. And the guy, the hunter, actually had a gun. He had blanks in it to, so the dog would have the sound of the shot. And up there on top, across the lake, they had, and I forgot to bring it, a bunch of plastic retrieving dummies or bumpers or whatever you want to call them. They just had a stack of them. Just across there in a bunch of weeds. So they'd throw those ducks out there in whatever, or in order that the guy asked, and then he'd send his dog. And it was never necessarily, he picked the sequence of it. So he may send him to that one first, and then that one, and then that one, And usually, the one the dog wants to go to is the last one that drops. But they wanted him to go where they wanted him to go. So after they did this, then they send him all the way across to pick up that bumper, and it was probably 100 yards across there. It was a long retrieve. Dog had no idea anything was over there. He just went. The guy told him, well, and he'd blow the whistle, and get him, because he'd start to veer off, and he'd blow the whistle and get him going in the right direction. He'd go up there, pick one up, fall all the way back. Well, about the time he got right about there, guy would pick up a duck and throw it right over the top of that dog's head. And the well-trained dogs, they just kept swimming. He'd get there, get the bumper, turn the dog around, send him and go get that duck that he threw. It was unbelievable, and I'm looking at my dog, and I'm thinking, one day you're going to be like that. And I got to thinking about it because, and I've tried some of these sermons before, and people that preach will tell you it's amazing what people pick up on, and repeat back to you, and you're thinking, I said that? But I was telling Mark this, because it really, and I'll try to explain how God talked to me about it, but he said, that'll preach. So when he asked me, I thought, well, we're going to find out if it'll preach, because I have no idea. It's amazing what God, if you just listen and you're just in tune with God in some of the circumstances of your daily life, what God can teach you. Because I found out that because I have been a religious person, and I've done the religious things, and I have found out that doesn't work. Okay? And unfortunately, I wish I would have learned this 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But it's been just in the past few years that God has pointed out. It's like you can do all those things, all those religious things, all those things on the list. And I was talking about this the men's breakfast one time, and Kevin Lukey said, he said, I was going through some stuff, and I found a list of things that he come across where they say, you do this, do this, do this, do this. Sorry about that. And you do it religiously, And I don't want to be religious. you know. Because I left to my own devices and left to being religious, you know, I'm not a very good person. And I do some dumb things. So I don't want to be that person. I want to be able to listen to God, hear his voice, and do what he asks me to do. You know? And it does include reading my Bible. But why am I reading my Bible is the reason, you know, the question I have to ask. You know, why am I coming here Sunday mornings? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? Is it just to be religious? Is it because that's what Christians do? But I got to think about it. And I came up with this, and sometimes coming up with the title of the message is one of the toughest things. And then with the PowerPoint, you got to come up with an outline, you know. I liked it better when I was not multimedia, you know, because I didn't have to come up with an outline. But it's a dog's life. You know, and how many ever heard that? It's a dog's life. What's that generally mean? It's a rough life. That's what it referred to. Then I see my dog. I'd like to have his life sometimes. You know, this is my dog's routine. Because Jenna gets up earlier than I do every morning. She's one of those sick people that can't sleep in. You know, one of those morning people. You know, and I pray for you because I don't understand it. But she'll get up and she has her routine. Well, my dog has his routine. When she gets up and walks out the room, he gets up off the floor and jumps up on bed beside me and sleeps there until I get up. And sometimes even after I get up, you know, look at me like, are you serious? It's early. You know, which is kind of like me, which I don't know how we manage to hunt together. You know, but he will get up to hunt. I will get up to hunt. So, but he doesn't have it rough. So I don't know how they come up with this. Have you ever seen Bob Spoonster's dog? You know what that dog does? He sits around on Bob, and Bob puts him in the truck, and he sits around on Bob in the truck. You know, and every now and again he'll go out and kill a small animal and bring it back to Bob. Because I heard that story, Bob. You're sending your dog out to kill rabbits. But if all my dog did was lay around, he would never get to the point where he would go out and do those retrieves, okay? But it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of repetition to get him to do that. And I don't know that my dog will ever become national champion, but he goes out and gets ducks and geese for me, and I'm okay with that because, to tell you the truth, I don't like swimming in a lake to get a dead duck when it's 30 degrees outside. So he does it, and I let him. You know, and Janet's like, you spoiled this dog. And since we are in church and my wife is here, I do spoil my dog. And now it's on tape and it's official, so I actually do spoil my dog. But, you know, and it's like, well, you treat her better than the kids. It's just like, well, I can't get the kids to jump into cold water and bring back the dead duck in its mouth. So, yeah, I treat him well. Because, you know, I'd hate for him to turn around and like, you go get him. But think about it. I mean, it started somewhere with each one of these dogs, and it started somewhere with mine, okay? And it starts somewhere when God, and your relationship with God, and that's, he chose you. He chose us, okay? First point. He seeks us, and he chooses us, okay? I didn't just, you know, hear a little knock on the door one day, open the door, and my dog's name is Buck. He wasn't standing at the door, you know, looking up at me like, I choose you. Okay? That's not how it worked. You know, I was looking through ads, and because I'd had a dog before, and it actually got stolen out of my yard. And I finally decided, it's like, I got to get a dog. So I started looking. and looking and looking and looking and looking for, and there was a lot of considerations when I did that. Okay? What breed do I want? For what I want. Okay. I like to get ducks. I like to hunt geese. So a Chihuahua is not going to do it. Okay. I need a retriever of some kind, and there are a few. So, and I'm not going to get into a debate. And Mark Johnson, some of you know him, has a golden retriever. Well, I prefer Labrador retrievers. Some people, other dogs, retrieving dogs. And that hunt test that I was at, there were all kinds of different breeds of dogs. Okay. There was bloodlines to consider. Okay, does this dog come from a hunting background, or is it just a show dog, or what? Male, female, size of the dog, or of his parents. Does he have something? And we went over. I found one over just south of Effingham, Illinois. Jan and I drove over there, and I did a number of personality tests on the dog, just checked to get a fairly even temperament dog, one that would be workable. Okay. God chooses us. If you look in John 15:16, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. God chose us. Ephesians 1:4. Even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him in love. And 2 Thessalonians 2:13. But we ought always to give thanks to God for you, brothers, beloved by the Lord, because God chose you as the first fruits to be saved through sanctification by the Spirit and belief in the truth. God chose us. Okay? But here's the thing. God didn't look at your bloodline. God didn't look at your qualifications. God didn't care. He just chose you. He chose me. He didn't put all these qualifications on it. And I hate to be quoting anything from Facebook, but a friend of mine posted this. And it was talked about Jacob, the deceiver, and it talked about Saul, and it talked about all these people, Rahab. And it said, God does not pick the qualified or call the qualified. God qualifies the called. Because if you look at Abram, what did he do? He said, come follow me. Well, we don't know anything about Abram. You look at Jacob, and we were just in Sunday school this morning, R.C. Sproles was talking about Jacob. He was a deceitful person. God said, I'm choosing him to spread my word. That is where the Messiah is coming from. And if you look at Jesus' genealogy, and it goes through it, who did we have? We had Jacob. Who do we have? We had Rahab. Rahab. And on down the line. And they weren't outstanding people, but God used them. So we brought him home, and I just started building a relationship with him. And I did choose him, but he also had to accept me. Because I have had dogs that just, they don't want to listen to me. There's something about it. They don't want to listen. And we have to choose it. We have to accept God's grace. Okay? He's offering, he chooses us. We have to be willing to listen. But I just spent some time with him, and I provided for him. I fed him. I housed him. I took care of him. God takes care of me. I don't have anything. If it weren't for God, I'm nothing if it weren't for God. And one of the favorite things to do is you start retrieving. I do it in the hallway. I close all the doors in the hallway, and I start throwing a little puppy-size bumper. Okay, so when he gets it, he has nowhere to go but back to me, you know. And I'll praise him, and he starts to figure out, hey, this is pretty fun. Well, I read just in the past year what happens with smaller predators is when they get their game, they take it back to their den. Lions don't have that problem. Grizzly bears don't have that problem because nothing's going to take it away from them and eat them on top of that. You know, but smaller predators have that problem. Dogs fit into that category. So what I did was, he would come back to me. I became his safe haven, his den, his refuge. He knew he was safe with me. Anybody ever read the book of Nahum? It's one of those little books. It's only about 3 chapters long. One of the prophets, minor prophets. And it talks about Nineveh. Nineveh must have been a bad place, because there was a couple books, you know, devoted to Nineveh. You have Jonah going to Nineveh. You have Nahum. It's all about what God is going to do, destroy Nineveh, because they're so wicked, this, that, and it's terrible. But there's this one verse in chapter 1, and it seems so out of place, because all it's talking about is how angry God is with Nineveh, how he's going to destroy Nineveh. And there's this verse, Nahum 1:7. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows who take refuge in him. In the NIV it says, he is a refuge. And if you look in the Psalms, it talks about God and it refers to him as a refuge. Be safe in God. That is the one place. The world will let you down. People will let you down. Circumstances will let you down. But God is your refuge. In the times of trouble, when the storms are hitting you, when you think everything's coming apart in your life, God is your refuge. Not only did I go get him, bring him home, and Janet and I on our way back were discussing what's the first command we're going to teach him. Now, it wasn't put that way, okay? And this is funny, because I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. We were hunting, and I was talking about this. And it's the same command that your parents discussed about you. What's the first thing we're going to teach him? What is it, Don? Ed, what do you think it is? Okay. His name. Exactly. And the guy looked at me, because I asked him, I said, what's the first command you teach your dog? You sit? Nope. I said, it's his name. God calls us by our name. He doesn't say, you, the one standing over there. You know, you, no, not you. You, no. Because you look, the Lord said to Abram, and this morning in Sunday school, it's so great, and the songs that Don picked, I did not go through songs with Don. He sent me a text saying, basically, what are you preaching on? And I said, call him God, and it's amazing. That's all I said. And the songs that Don picked, because I know Don didn't just, flip a coin or just, flip through the book and say that one. God laid those on his heart. But this morning we're in there and we're talking where Jacob wrestles with the angel of the Lord. And what was the question? He said, bless me. I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And what did the angel say? What's your name? He said, it's Jacob. He said, from now on, your name is Israel. Okay? If you look, John chapter 1 is a perfect example of that. It says, there was a man, and his name was John. And when he called Saul on the road to Damascus, he didn't say, hey, you, stop what you're doing. No, he said, Saul, Saul, God knows your name. He calls you by name. John 10, 3 through 5. To him the gatekeeper opens, the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name. Okay? And some of you, if you're a little offended that I'm using a reference to dogs and equating us to it, throughout Scripture, you're referred to as sheep. Okay? Sheep are not intelligent animals, let me tell you. And it's probably actually pretty appropriate because they're pretty helpless. If you don't talk to Bob, he raised sheep, and he can tell you, sheep are dumb. Okay? At least my dog has learned things, Sheep, they learn they don't want to be eaten, and that's about it. Okay? Sheep, you have to move them because they will graze a field and they'll keep grazing and keep grazing and keep grazing when there's nothing left to eat, and they won't move. So you have to move them. So if you're offended by being with the dog reference, well, okay, you're a bunch of sheep. I don't know. But he calls us by name. When he's brought out his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Okay? My dog not only knows my voice, I speak to him in a couple different languages. I use a whistle too, because sometimes he's far enough out that my voice doesn't carry. And I can blow the whistle, and most of the time he responds. We're working on it. Okay? Somebody else could pick up the same whistle and blow it the same way I do, and he wouldn't respond at all. He even knows the way I blow a whistle. It sounds different to him. He knows my voice. I walk in the door, no, I won't say that because then you'll break into my house. You tell somebody and they'll break into my house because this dog does not get off the bed when somebody walks in until he hears my voice. Okay? But he knows what my vehicle sounds like. He goes crazy. He knows when I'm coming home. He knows my voice. He listens to my commands. And I've hunted with another guy that has a dog. Yellow lab, just like mine, only it's female and it's a lot smaller. Okay, I know the commands he uses for that dog, same ones I use. Dog doesn't listen to me. I'm not the master. Do you listen to God's voice? Do you recognize God's voice? For those of you married, when your spouse calls, do they have to reintroduce themselves, tell you who's calling? No. If they do, you're in trouble, okay? Simple, You recognize them. Why? Because you hear their voice. You recognize their voice. Do you speak with God enough that you recognize his voice when he calls you? Third point, he sends us. And this is where there are so many different aspects of it, of all the commands. And, we get bogged down in commands. God says this, God says that. But a lot of the commands I want my dog to do, and some of them have to do with his safety. If he's running and he's about to head across the road, and there's a truck or a car coming, I blow the whistle for him to stop and sit. I want him to do it immediately for his own safety. Okay? God does those things for our benefit. It's not to keep us from having fun. It's not to keep us from enjoying life. But he knows what's best for us. Okay? Sometimes we don't. Most of the times we don't. Because we look at what we want to do and what might be good, and that is the choices sometimes we're given. What's between what seems to be good and what's best. God always chooses what's best, whether we choose to listen to him or not. God sends us. And there's so many aspects. And there's John 20:21. Jesus said to them, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you." And there's just so many aspects of the retrieving. And I got a few of those, and I'm going to go through them quickly. Good thing is I had about 8 cups of coffee, so my 3-hour sermon I can condense down into about a half hour, 45 minutes. And these are in no particular order, and I'm not necessarily saying how I do it. But first thing is, because, retriever he's a Labrador retriever. Retrieving is what he does. Okay? But he has to learn that he's not retrieving for himself. He's retrieving for his master. Okay? What we do for him when he sends us, we're not doing it for ourselves. We're doing it to glorify God. Okay? And those dogs, those grand national champions, yes, they get the ribbons and they get all this other thing, but who gets really the glory is the trainer. Okay? And he is the one that people look to for their dog. Okay? You don't see anybody taking their dog over to see the Grand National Champions so they can discuss retrieving, strategy. It doesn't happen. If they want to have questions, they go to the master. Okay? So he has to learn, because he will hunt for himself. And he will take off and run around with, he's got to understand he's working for the master. Number 2, somebody asked me one time, it's like, well, do you give him treats or reward when he retrieves a duck and brings it back to you? I said, yeah, I do. They said, what is it? I said, he gets to retrieve another duck and bring it back to me. He does it because he loves it. And it's something that when it's in the testimonies from Snow Trip, and they were talking about what they had discussed over the weekend, and Steve Etcher said something, they were the pretenders and whatever, and Steve Etcher said the pursuers, the ones that do it, serve God because they love serving God. That's where we should be. We do it because we love to. And sometimes it's rough. There are days that it is really, really cold out there. But I can't keep him out. Buck knows. If I put my camo on, you can ask her, she's nodding her head. The dog goes nuts. Okay? Then if I go grab the shotgun case, he's bouncing. And I found even in summertime when I'm working with him, training him, I'll go grab the bag with the bumpers in it. And if he sees me carries it in, he starts bouncing. All I have to do, he can be in the other room. If I can pick my whistles up and I carry 2 on the lanyard and they hit each other and jingle, my dog is there. Because he knows what's coming. And I think about that. Do I react the same way when God says, I'm going to use you now? Do I react? Am I full of joy? Because I've had him out in snowstorms, ice storms, sub-zero weather. And I couldn't keep him home. He loves to do it. He has to go where I send him. Okay? And sometimes, because I'll give you an example. I hunted Tuesday and shot a goose, and we stepped it off. The goose actually landed about 4 steps in front of my blind. I didn't send him on that one. I figured I could lean forward and get the goose. I didn't need to send him. And he went nuts. He wanted to go. It's from there to that pew, or less. I didn't need him to go. Okay? Sometimes when and I've had this happen, is the one that falls closest, the one that gets his attention, is not the one I want him to retrieve. The one I want him to retrieve is the one that's farther, and his head's up, and he's starting to swim away. So he has to listen. He has to go where I send him. Sometimes we want to, and I know I want to do what's the easiest one, to do the flashiest one, the one that seems the easiest. But God says, no, I want you to go here. And then we'll worry about that. Yeah. And there's so many distractions, and I remember saying that, and that was probably the most impressive when they picked that duck up and threw it over that dog's head when he was bringing him. And just there's so many distractions in our life. And sometimes we got to figure out, is this a distraction, or is this what God wants me to be doing? Because yesterday, preparing, I was going to clean the garage, which it badly needs it, but they give me some time alone and think about this. Well, Matt called and said, I think the brakes are going out on the truck. I said, what makes you think that? He said, I pushed the pedal, it went all the way to the floor and didn't stop. Good indication. So he brought it back, and I worked on the truck. I also had Isaac, my grandson, there. And he is Bridget's husband's son from a previous marriage, but he is my grandson. And I look at the way God looks at us, and we're a child of God. We're not a stepson. We're his child. We're not stepchildren. And he is my grandson. And next weekend he's going back to his mother in Wichita, so I won't see him for a while. And I got to thinking, because it's like, I really need to work on this. But God was saying, no. This is where you need to be. Because you need to show him love. You need to make sure that he knows he is loved. And if he's in the nursery, hi Isaac, if they have the TV on. Because that's where we need to concentrate. I mean, there are so many good things we can be doing. But we need to concentrate on the people. Because that's what we're taking to heaven. We're not taking this building to heaven. We're taking other people to heaven. When he said, lay up your treasures in heaven, what was he talking about? What can you take? Other people. And they have, going after the bumpers over in the tree, it's called a blind retrieve because the dog has no idea it's there. And it's very tough to teach that. You have to do it in steps because the dog has to learn to trust you. Okay, so you do it in steps. And I actually used a friend of mine, the guy I hunt with, tree farm, because nice narrow rows of Christmas trees. Because, and the Bible addresses this is wide is the way to destruction, but narrow. You want narrow. So he doesn't get distracted by all those things. If I just started him off with a dummy bumper 100 yards away in this big field, he'd just take off whichever way he wanted to. So I get a narrow way for him to go, because that's what leads to that. And I start it in steps. I just start laying the pattern out, one after another, so he builds up a trust. He can see the first one. He goes and gets it. And then he always knows when I send him out there, there's going to be something. Until you extend it and you extend it to if you're in a hunting situation, you see the bird and you get him going, he knows that there's going to be something there. Well, God does that. He helps us build that trust a little at a time, step by step. Okay? And sometimes we get off the mark because we're just busy going. Okay? And with him, I have to stop him. I have to correct him with hand signals and whistle to get him back online. And we do that. I do that so often. Of going around, going and going and going, and I'm off the mark. And it doesn't take much variation. Over a long period of time, you're way away from where you need to be. and it's especially true in water retrieves, because the dog's eyes are only off the water about that high. But I'm the one that's looking and I see. So he's got to trust me to know that I'm sending him where he needs to go. If God calls you and God sends you, and I think back on Abraham, he didn't lay out a plan for Abraham. He said, come and go to the land I'm going to show you. That is not very specific. So, and I can imagine what I would be. It's like, well, where are we going? What direction? You know, how long is it going to take? You know, question after question after question. All he said was, come, go. I'll show you. And had he not done that, there wouldn't be a song, Father Abraham. It'd be Father George or something. You know. We have to trust. But that God doesn't just pour it all on you all at one time. He lets you build it up. And he has to listen to me. He has to hear my voice, hear my whistle. Stop. I want him to stop and look at me for instructions. Do we stop and look at God? And as much as he loves going hunting, much as he loves retrieving, you know the one thing he loves most of all? He's an 85-pound Labrador retriever who thinks he's a lap dog. That dog loves to be near me. A lot of the time he loves to be on me. Okay? All that other stuff. He loves being near me more than he likes eating, more than he likes hunting. Okay? When I was putting the finishing touches on it, Janet had shut the door. And when I first started last night, he was laying on the bed right at my feet. And Isaac came in, and Janet, the dog went out. And he'll sit there and at my door and whine, because he loves to be near me. How I wish that I were more like him sometimes. And there are times when he knows he's in trouble that he kind of sulks up, and we do that. Your kids do that. But more than anything, he loves to be near me. Do you love to be near God? You know, I had a friend of mine say it this way. Anybody got one of those big, cushy recliners that when you sit down, it just kind of folds around you? A friend of mine said one time, says, God wants to be like that, where you just climb up on his lap and he just kind of folds himself and surrounds you. And you just get comfortable in him. Oh, that I was like that all the time. Let's pray.